Hello, good evening, everyone, and welcome to Heating Rights for People with Disabilities. My name is Evan Yankee, and I'm Advocacy Director for Brooklyn Center for Independence of the Disabled. We're here tonight to talk about heat in New York and what you can do about it when your heat is out as renters, and especially as renters with disabilities. So I'm going to turn it over to our housing rights specialist, Nicolas Vargas. Take it away.
Thanks, Evan. Hello, everyone. Hopefully everyone knows me. If you don't, my name is Nicolas. I am the housing rights specialist over at the Brooklyn Center for the Independence of the Disabled. I help other tenants with disabilities try to, get the things that they deserve from our landlords, from our housing systems, enforce our rights and protections, and also, give people the information they need to feel confident in those rights and protections. So today, particularly, we're going to be talking about our rights during the cold months of the year. This is called heat season. Um, and I'm going to share my screen. Sorry, trying to move things out of the way. If anyone knows how to show the slideshow, please let me know because I've never used this before. Never
So you
used
you should be able to go to slideshow and then presenter mode.
present in Teams. No, start slideshow from the beginning.
Yeah.
Okay. How does that look?
Great. Perfect.
Okay, awesome. So we're going to be going from the beginning, not all the way from the beginning, but from the beginning of New York City, at the site of when um, large apartment buildings and a lot of people started living in New York City together, in what was called tenement housing. So in the late 1800s and early 1900s, the 20th century, people lived in what were called tenement houses. They were large, very cramped, very not well insulated. They were cold. They were poorly ventilated. Basically, they did nothing besides give you four walls and a roof. Back then, before we had housing laws, these were all that landlords were required to do. Tenants moved to New York City for a variety of reasons, whether it was jobs, whether it was to escape persecution, whether it was to live the American dream. But when they arrived in New York City, the only housing that they could get, if they were working people, not if they were very rich people, they could, live in castles or whatever, were these tenement houses. Um, they lacked some of the basic services that we have today in our modern housing system. This includes heat, light, indoor toilets, and ventilation. All of those things weren't required, and they were likely not had in these buildings. And as you can imagine, people didn't really like that, and it was kind of untenable. Even though these were called tenement houses, they were untenable. Um, so tenants had enough. They were paying rents that were really high, like we're paying today, but they were getting little in return. In 1918, there was a coal shortage. So the tenants who were getting heat started to not get heat. Heat started disappearing. Landlords were worried that the coal that they could buy was too expensive. So they did a calculation in their head. They wanted to get the profit from the rents, but they didn't want to have to pay the high costs of the toll of the coal. And at this time, we were in the First World War, and coal was being shipped overseas. Coal was being shipped places for the military, and there was a lack of that coal for tenants to heat their homes. So tenants got together and they said that, if we're going to be paying these landlords for a house, we should be getting heat. We're paying really, really expensive rent, so we should be getting these basic needs that we need in order to stay in these houses. And so they got together, they started talking to each other, they congregated in their hallways, outside their buildings, and they started to craft a plan. Their plan was they were going to withhold rent until their landlord agreed to give them these basic needs like heat. A slogan, like you can see up top, was "No heat, no rent." It's a very catchy slogan. We still use it today. Um, because of these rent strikes, which were historic, they happened across New York City. 200,000 tenants partook in these rent strikes. The courts were overwhelmed. Landlords were trying to evict tenants left and right, saying they weren't paying us, but tenants uh, together were withholding their rents, were standing strong. Landlords would try to evict them, tenants would move back in. And this kind of back and forth struggle put a lot of pressure on housing courts, on lawmakers and politicians to do something about this unrest. So the large amount of people who rent struck and who withheld their rent and saw themselves as deserving of dignity in the form of heat and other basic needs. They started winning. Lawmakers, judges, politicians started to side with the tenants and said, "Okay, we want to give you these basic needs. We want to force your landlords to meet these needs." Like I was saying, um, these rent strikes led to these court hearings that tenants were winning in. Courts were rejecting the idea that heat and other essential services were optional or negotiable. Um, they started to pass down judgments against the landlords, saying that you couldn't evict them unless you gave them heat and gave them the opportunity to pay back the rent. So it was a really, really great moment for tenants that they proved that taking collective action, withholding your rent, organizing with your neighbors, talking about the issues that are in your apartment could actually get you significant gains and wins and repairs and essential services in your apartments. So, uh, a culmination of all these things that were happening in 1967, the Housing Maintenance Code was passed. So this drew from a bunch of different cases, a bunch of different campaigns, and a bunch of different laws that had passed since the 1920s that required heat and hot water. Required landlords to provide heat and hot water. So this was the first time that temperature standards were enforced citywide. Prior to that, they were only enforced on a case-by-case basis. After 1967, it was enforced citywide. Um, After 1967, though, there was still, not a complete standardization of these enforcements. Landlords would figure out ways to get out of the enforcement mechanisms. They would figure out ways to still not provide heat. And so the city created systems and administrative agencies to enforce them. That's where we get the HPD and 311, the Housing Preservation and Development Agency. And that's when the city really, really took kind of a first person, you know, uh, uh, they took they took this very seriously. They took the enforcement very seriously. They took it upon themselves. So what is heat season? Let's talk about what the law actually is. So heat season is the days between October 1st and May 31st. In these days, during the daytime, before the nighttime, between 6 a.m. and 10 p.m., the temperature outside has to be at least 68, below, sorry. The temperature outside has to be below 55 degrees. And if the temperature in the daytime is below 55 degrees, the temperature inside has to be at least 68 degrees. And then at nighttime, from 10 p.m. to 6 a.m., there is no requirement for the temperature outside. It just always has to be 62 degrees inside your apartment. Okay. Uh, I know it's kind of confusing. I still get confused by this, but we have links to these helpful graphics that we can send you after this, and we'll send out with this recording. Or you can follow the nyc.gov/heat season link. But let's talk about the enforcement mechanisms. So if you don't have heat, if your apartment during the daytime isn't 68 degrees inside at least, and at nighttime your apartment isn't 62 degrees at least, what you're going to do first is contact your landlord. So you want to give your landlord the opportunity to fix the problem if they can, and become aware of the issue if they weren't already aware of it. So when you contact your landlord, you're going to ask them why there isn't any heat in your apartment. You're going to ask them, uh, you know, have you tried to fix it? Were you aware of this? Once you get that answer, whether it's a yes or no, you're going to inform them of the requirements that the law makes on them to provide the heat during this heat season. Um, we do this because we want to show to the landlord that we ourselves are equipped with the knowledge that we need to enforce our rights. We want to let them know that, we can't be easily pushed over. We want to let them know that we're not going to allow them to evade these laws and requirements, until it's warm again. Um, we encourage you to conduct these conversations in writing if at all possible. So, either through email, text, or letter, because we want a paper trail. It's really, really important that we have evidence that we've let our landlord know about the issue um, through in writing, because these agencies that we're going to talk about soon are going to ask for that proof. There's a lot of prerequisites or steps that you need to complete prior to going to the agency or withholding rent or whatever it might be. So it's really important that this initial contacting your landlord period be done in writing. Okay, so then we're going to start what's called a heat log. There is a picture of an example of a heat log down below. Again, we will send links to all of these media and resources in the follow-up emails to this. But the heat log basically is very simple, and you don't need to, use this spreadsheet that we send you. You can write it down on a piece of paper as long as it's accurate, and as long as you can prove that this was actually the temperature. So the heat log is going to track the temperature in your apartment at different times of the day. Here it shows, the date that you log the heat, the time that you log the heat, the reference number to the 311 complaint, which we'll get to in a minute, the outdoor temperature, the inside temperature, and so on and so forth. Because if this does go to housing court, it will require you to prove that these temperatures are accurate. We recommend taking a picture of your thermometer or whatever it is that you're using to take the temperature. You cannot use your iPhone's weather app. You need to independently register the temperature on your own in your apartment. So if you have a thermometer, which we recommend you getting, even if it's a mercury thermometer that you used to see when you were a little kid, hold it in your room for X amount of time, take a picture with it on your phone, and your phone will record the metadata. That's just a fancy word to say that it will log the time and date on your phone, and then you will log that in this heat log. So after this and this heat log, you're going to be doing for the duration that you are without heat. So it's not one step in this process. It's kind of throughout this whole thing. And then next, you're going to submit a complaint to 311. 311 is a service that all New Yorkers can use that connects you to different agencies in New York City. The agency that it's going to connect you when you call about the heat is going to be HPD, the Housing Preservation and Development Agency. You're going to call and report a violation, or you're going to go on this link right here, portal.311.nyc.gov, and it's going to take you to a little screen that I have down here on the slideshow. You're going to input your address, or you're going to tell them your address. You're going to tell them what's going on. And once this complaint is logged, the complaint gets sent to your landlord. So you don't need to inform your landlord again that you have submitted a complaint with 311. 311 will inform your landlord immediately. And what will happen next is they will send an inspector out to your apartment to record the heat themselves and to determine if it is below the temperature that's required for your landlord to have. And so if it is determined that your landlord is not in compliance with the law, that you are not receiving adequate heat, they will give your landlord a violation. This violation comes with two things. It comes with a fine on the landlord, and it comes with a set amount of time that they have to fix the issue. Um, this isn't the best system because some of the fines that they put on the landlord are as little as $150 a month for not repairing or providing services that they are under compliance of. Um, for landlords, if we do the cost benefit analysis for this, some landlords might say it's going to cost me less money to just accept these fines than to fix the bigger problem. So that's why it's important not to stop there. Um, if it doesn't stop there, if your landlord doesn't fix the problem after the 311 complaint, then we have the ability to start an HP action. So there's a little more information on here than the other ones, but we'll try to boil it down as simple as possible. An HP action is basically a lawsuit against your landlord. So you're suing your landlord in housing court for a repair or service issue. It is a process that has been made specifically so tenants themselves can take this on themselves. Does not require you to hire a lawyer. It does not require you to do anything that's outside of your capacity. But it does require you to serve your landlord. So usually that comes down to you going to the post office and mailing what's called a petition to your landlord. But it's basically a more aggressive form of a 311 complaint. Um, the same process happens for an HP action as it does for an HPD complaint. The housing court judge will send an inspector out to your apartment to record the temperature to see if the landlord's in violation of the law. The judge will set a date for a hearing where they'll go over the evidence that you bring and the evidence that the inspector has and give the landlord an opportunity to answer any questions for themselves. And they will give the landlord a much stricter and much higher fine if they do not repair the heat in a timely manner. So although it is a process that will take you outside of your home, whereas a 311, you can do it from the comfort of your own home. The housing court process is not as difficult as it may seem. And you can always go with a family member, you can always go with a fellow neighbor, and you can always reach out to organizations like BCID, and someone like myself is happy to go with you and fill out these forms. I do it a lot. I actually like seeing these things through because, a victory for one tenant ideally would be a victory for others. Landlords are less likely to make the same mistake twice. So I am happy to come with you. So after the HP action, there's one final step, withholding rent. Withholding rent is a legal right in New York State. tenants have won this right, since the 1900s. It's been something that tenants before us have done with far more risk. Now it is a legally enshrined right that we have, but there still can be consequences. There can still be things that you could do incorrectly that might affect your case. So we encourage you to not do this on your own. Do not just haphazardly jump into a rent strike or a withholding. You should always consult a housing advocate or a tenant lawyer before taking this step. But with that being said, your landlord has a lot more to lose in this situation. The cost benefit analysis for them is much greater. Your rent is far more than the violation that they're going to get from HPD. So they're going to be incentivized to fix the problem much faster if they're not getting your rent, and even much faster if you're able to talk to your neighbors who are likely experiencing this problem as well to withhold their rent with you. But again, do not take this step by yourself. Talk to a housing advocate like myself, or talk to a lawyer before you take this step. So, in summary, we have many rights that have been won and have been put to practice over the years, over a century. But what we've learned is that we have to have the information of those rights and the steps it takes to put them into practice in order to enforce them. So, unfortunately, not every landlord is going to give you everything you deserve and require under the law. But we have people and we have experience who have successfully accomplished this and gotten back, heat when people haven't had heat, gotten hot water when people haven't had hot water. Um, so large toolkit to put it into effect. You are not alone. Reach out to BCID, not only to help you along this way, to get more information about these issues, but also to learn more about how to plug into different campaigns to make our rights stronger, to make our housing more accessible, and to make the world a better place. So that's all I have.
Thank you, Nico. I'm sure a bunch of us have questions, but I'll go first. So I have a bunch of questions. So my first question is about space heaters. So this has happened to me before, where the heat is in the boiler or the radiators are not working, and a landlord says, "Just use the space heater." Like, is that allowed? Is that an acceptable alternative? Or what do you do if a landlord says, "Just use the space heater"?
Yeah, I mean that's really common. That's a really common thing that landlords try to say and to, to tide tenants over while they don't have heat. It's acceptable for tenants to use space heaters. The only issue is that it's going to increase your electricity bill, which obviously is already incredibly high. But in the instance that you don't have heat and you are using a space heater in order to make up for the loss of heat from the heating system, I would recommend to log the change in the price of your electricity bill prior to using the space heater and the electricity bill when you're using the space heater. You're also going to be uh, from the first one that we said, documenting and contacting your landlord. So you're going to have evidence from when this issue first started happening, when the inspector came and gives a violation. You're going to have evidence for when this started happening, when you started using the space heater, and when the cost of electricity started going up. But it is not a replacement for you know building wide infrastructural heat. So the heat cannot come from an electric heater. That is not sufficient under the law. It doesn't meet the requirements for heat season. So if your landlord has 20 space heaters in your apartment, that is absolutely illegal, and you should contact us immediately.
Thank you. And I'm sure other people have questions, but I have more questions too. Um, so One thing I've encountered a lot for myself and others is endless scheduling with landlords where they say they're going to show up or they say they did show up, but they don't actually show up.
Hmm.
Um, so what's your approach for that for a landlord who makes the motions to seem like he's trying to fix the problem, but you just never actually get them to do it?
I mean, that's a good question. I think, in the worst case, that could be a kind of scheme that the landlord is trying to do to get out of some of the enforcements from the city agencies that require them to fix it on a set timeline. If the city is giving them a month, sometimes they might say, "Oh, I tried to get into the tenant's apartment to try to extend the period in which they can fix the problem." Um, the best thing that you can do is um, get support from other people. So if you aren't home, that you can have someone be there in your place. If the landlord tries to come at um, a time that's not going to work for you based on your work schedule or based on doctor's appointments, whatever it may be, your neighbors can help let your landlord in. Your family members, your friends can help let your landlord in. Um, Definitely inform your landlord that there is a requirement for 24 hours notice when there is a maintenance request that they need to make a repair. They can't just come unannounced. They need to give you 24 hours notice. Um, when it comes to these situations of like a really big repair issue, I know it's inconvenient that, a landlord only has to give you 24 hours and they can show up pretty much at any time. Um, it it is very, very important for you and your well-being. So please reach out to people. Do not try to do this on your own. Keep a log. Really, really make sure that you keep your appointments, both with your landlord and with the inspector that's going to come when you call HPD. You don't want to miss these things. It's really important, and it does look bad on you, unfortunately, if you were to take this to housing court and you had, you know, prior scheduled appointments with the landlord or HPD that you missed.
Thank you. And then my last question, and then I'll let Lisa go. My last question is, so a lot of people with disabilities live in housing where they're that's administered by like an agency, like mental health supportive housing or developmental disability supportive housing or substance abuse supportive housing. Um, do these agencies that run these spaces still have obligations to provide heat?
100,000%. Yes. There any housing operating in New York City is going to be required to meet these housing laws, requirements, and protections. So HPD covers every form of housing that you can think of. Even if you're a NYCHA tenant, you can call HPD and they will help direct your complaint to somewhere appropriate. When it comes to HP actions, you can sue private, public, a mix of the two landlords. Yes, they all fall under that jurisdiction. So definitely.
Thank you.
Go ahead, Katinka.
Uh, you're muted. Oh, there you are.
Yeah. Um, so let's say a case goes to court. Generally, how long does a landlord have to fix a problem? Is there a set amount of time or is it different with each case?
That's a great question. I would have to look to refresh myself specifically, but there are three classifications for violations. It's A, B, C. Um, it's either A is the highest or C is the highest. But depending on what the inspector or the judge rules, that gives the landlord the timeline. It could be from 30 days for emergencies, 60 to 90 days, or I think it's like 3 months. But not only does it set the timeline, the severity of the repair issue also sets the amount of fines that they get. So the more serious the issue, like heat being a very, very serious habitability issue, gets one of the highest level of fines. So usually if it's an issue of the home would be uninhabitable without that certain service, then the timeline will be shorter, the fine will be greater. Go ahead.
And to follow up with that, does a tenant get to move somewhere while a repair is being done because it's, January? Are they moved somewhere, or do they have to, remain in their home? Do you know what I mean? Can they get emergency shelter mandated by the courts? Or
Yes, so unless the house is deemed uninhabitable,
yeah,
um, then tenants unfortunately will not get assistance uh, with transferring to temporary shelter. There are cases where, there is a carbon monoxide leak, or there are cases where there's improper ventilation that's, you know, usually it's involving some sort of gas that's, potentially harmful to the tenant, or, there are structural issues. The building is, going to fall over at any second. These are things that would advance HPD to uh, provide you with temporary shelter. But in
okay,
in those cases, the temporary shelter is not adequate at all. It's usually a really, really bad, small, inaccessible hotel room that they only give you for about 2 to 3 days, and then
right,
you're placed in the shelter system.
right,
So it's really not great. So my advice would be reach out and follow these steps before it gets that bad,
right.
right? Let's work to solve the problem before it gets to the point where you can't live in the place anymore, and then your home could be condemned by a city agency, and they would lock you out, and then they would give you uh, really inadequate help finding a next place to live.
Okay.
How do you how do you establish the temperature inside your apartment for this purpose?
Yeah, that's a great question. There are a couple of different thermometers you can get. There are some thermometers that you can get that are Bluetooth thermometers, so that they connect to your computer or your phone wirelessly, that constantly track the temperature in a room in your house. So, like we were saying, um, if it's not, above 62 degrees at night, that thermometer would tell you. But if you have, one of those old school mercury thermometers, what you would do is take a picture of the thermometer inside your house in ideally every single room, because again, I don't know if I mentioned this, but this law requires the temperature in every single room to, in the daytime, be above 68 degrees, and at nighttime to be above 62 degrees. It's not just if it's in one room close to the window where it's really sunny. It has to be in every single room. So what you would do is take a picture of that at night and in the daytime in every single room, and then you would add that to your log. And then if you were to go to court or need to prove it to somebody, you would bring those photos from your phone, and then you would be able to extract the data from those phones that would prove that you actually took it at what time and what day.
So it looks like we have some folks who I'm gonna remove. Um,
Yeah,
Maybe
can we
they,
get a remove
maybe they
on
just
him? He's being really like racist towards me. He's been sending me private DMs.
okay. So I think I'm gonna just
I put that person in the waiting room, but you can kick them out
yeah,
if you.
yeah. I think we're gonna remove them.
You didn't seem like our demographic. But yes, so that's a great question. You want to, again, document as much as possible. The more evidence you have, the more you're likely to get this repair done quicker. And it's something I forgot to mention, which I will add after to these slides, is that when you do win a case in housing court against your landlord for lack of an essential service like heat or hot water or something else, not only do you get the win of getting that service turned back on, but you're likely to get a rent abatement for the time that you didn't have that service. So we're all paying rent. And you could divvy up that rent to, a portion of it is going to, my heat, a portion's going to my hot water, a portion's going to my bedroom, a portion's going to my kitchen. You're paying for all of these things in your rent. And if you're not getting one of those things, you're basically paying for something that you're not getting. And so when you go to housing court and you win and you can prove that you didn't have heat for this time, you're likely to get a reward in the form of a rent abatement. So they're either going to give you back money or you're going to get money off of your rent in the future retroactively. So it's really, really important that we keep evidence of how long we've been without these services because the big money, big bucks. And as a non-joke, it incentivizes your landlord not to do that in the future. If your landlord gets caught and has a punishment, they're more likely to not keep your heat off in the future. If they remember, oh, last time I kept the heat off, I had to pay this big amount of money. Let me just keep it on to save money.
Okay, I had one more question. Oh, go ahead.
I just wanted to just, if you don't mind, like add to what you have been saying because everything has been about like regarding with the heat. So in my experience, I have had total opposite where, and that's why they had to put back the latches that I had to control the heat because my heat, I was getting too much heat. And they wind up busing into my apartment because every time I did call the 311 and they came out when we was underneath lecture, my apartment read all the time, almost 80 degrees and up. Sometime it was 95. So a couple of times I had to go to the hospital for heat exhaustion. And of course, their first thing is, well, you have AC. I'm like, yeah, but I also pay electricity. So the judge, that was my first time being in front of the judge, and he did explain to them because they had about 25 to like 30 people outside of my house. I was on my way to work and I didn't hear anybody because I was in the shower and everything like that. And they literally started drilling. And the judge really told me that, unless for me to know that unless they feel like it's someone deceased in the apartment or if, say, for instance, they think it's an emergency, no one is supposed to be like that. I called the cops, I called everyone. And it wasn't that I didn't want to let them in. I'm just like, give me a minute. But then to see like 20 people outside of your home was scary. So they wound up seeing all of the notes and everything that was given from 311 and when NYCHA used to come out and have their thermometer and it read 85, 95 degrees every time. It could be like late at night. And I'm right over the boiler. So what is the suggestion of people who can't control like quote unquote their heat and it's the opposite and they're getting too much heat and they don't have the radiators to turn it down or they pull down the windows, but they can't. What is the next step for someone in that situation?
Right. Thank you, Latia. I mean, that's terrible. And it's not the first time I've heard of something like that happening, for you and your complex. It is difficult to say without having a more background information on what exactly is causing the heat to be that high. Like, there's never any reason why the heat should be that high. I and this is something you're working on with Evan and you've worked on with me before, is trying to go directly to NYCHA to higher and higher levels of accountability within NYCHA in order to reach someone who knows what's going on and why it's going on, which takes a level of commitment and advocacy that, is so um is so commendable from you. Is you have so much patience, you have so much grace, and honestly, so much fight in you. um I would recommend going to, again, higher and higher levels of accountability in NYCHA. And then also in that case, because it's going on so long, is potentially reaching out to the media, potentially reaching out to your local elected officials. Both of these people have connections within NYCHA, that are both reputational and also disciplinary, right? Our elected officials, they give NYCHA the funding, and our media is able to shine a light on cases where people are being mistreated, and agencies and corporations, they don't like that. So those are the two things that I would recommend without knowing too much more about the in-depth details. But I'm happy to talk about it after the call.
And one last thing I wanted to ask too is like, so what about the elderly people? Because I was just talking to my neighbor who's next door to me, and she was saying that like I didn't know this, but she says that she sometimes have to put on the oven, even now after the renovations to have heat. And then she says sometimes like she hears the knocking because we're both over the boiler. So sometimes it'll go tick, 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 boom, like late at night. And then she's saying it's like a little bit, which I can contest to it, but we also have like stucco ceilings. So it's like certain heat is like keeping in. So I'm still trying to make sure that she's okay,
Right.
because she's 84 years old.
Right.
So, and she just knocked on just now, just trying to ask regarding, I had a family member who put up curtains. So I'm trying to get so that she could get her curtains together, but she is saying the heating, and she talked to management already. We had this discussion during our last meeting, and then last week, I went into the office, paying the rent, and then another 70-year-old gentleman came in and was upset because he didn't have heat. So I'm like, why is this? Do they not like look
Right.
over the heating situation before the season comes? Like, do they
Yeah. No,
not?
not all the time. I think it's something that is overlooked by a lot of landlords and housing providers in New York City, and that's why we see this problem persist, into the 21st century, where, everyone could have heat and should have heat. But it's still a really big problem in New York City. Tons and tons of people every day go without heat during the heat season. What I would recommend for your elderly neighbors is, probably they need some support going through the motions that I laid out in this presentation. They probably need support calling HPD, keeping a log, all this stuff. Maybe they don't even know about these steps. But oftentimes, and it's unfortunate, that letting your management company know that there's a problem isn't enough. It won't lead to any enforcement unless, they're just really good people. And we're not saying that they're not. But we were talking about how there's an analysis of costs and profit, and sometimes that takes over. So we need to step in and use the enforcement mechanisms that we have. So if you feel comfortable explaining that these steps after this call, you can show them this presentation. You can talk to them about it, but also you can call us, call BCID, and we'll be happy to talk to them. We'll be happy to add them to our roster of people that we're helping fight for better and dignified housing and more accessible housing. Absolutely.
So that actually answered the question I had as well. But does anyone else have any questions? All right. Well, if not, I'm going to end our recording. And if you're watching this in the recording, I'll make sure to put all of our contact info in the video description. But thanks for joining us tonight. And we will hopefully hear from you soon.